It was Christmas Eve last year when I decided that I won't dash at night anymore. I just don't think it's smart or worth the money. That night I didn't really want to work, but I had heard that people tipped really well on the night before Christmas, so I figured that I would take in a couple extra deliveries. The first 2 drop-offs that night went as usual, and the people were very friendly and thankful for me bringing them their food. But after that, the night went downhill quickly. It was about 9 at night, and I was waiting to choose the next order that I was going to take when I saw one that caught my eye. They just ordered a coffee and were offering a $10 tip, and to make things better, it was only about 4 minutes away from my location, so I figured it wouldn't be a problem and accepted it. That was when I saw the strange delivery instructions that were left on the order. All it said was, "Staying in a cabin out back. Please walk down the small trail along the side of the house. We'll wait outside." I sighed and rolled my eyes. I hated when the deliveries were complicated. But still, I figured it was a good tip, so I headed to the shop to pick up the coffee they had ordered and quickly headed toward their cabin. The small road leading up to the driveway of the main house was pitch dark aside from my headlights. And I don't know what it was about it, but something was making me worried. After pulling up to the house, I ended up sitting in my car for a minute to gather my thoughts and also reread the instructions just so I could be sure I was at the right place. Sure enough, I looked over toward the side of the house and saw the trail that they had wanted me to follow. I took a deep breath and got out of my car with the customer's order. And before walking toward the trail, I started looking around to see if I could see anyone or any sign of the cabin that I was supposed to be looking for, but it was too dark. I shook my head as I tried to brush off the strange sense of terror that I was feeling, and I began making my way down the trail that I was told to go down with the food. I walked for about 3 minutes, and when I didn't see any sign of a cabin, I started thinking that something was wrong. I figured that I should call the customer to make sure that I was heading in the right direction. I continued to look around as I pulled up the order so that I could call the customer, but I almost dropped my phone because I was shaking so much. There was something in the woods with me, watching my every move. I just didn't know where or what it was, but I knew it was there. Finally, the phone started ringing, but instead of bringing me some peace of mind, it only made me even more fearful. After the second ring on my side of the phone call, out in the darkness to my right, I could hear a phone ringtone going off. That's when I realized that whoever ordered the food was out there in the woods with me that night. I took the phone away from my ear and turned the flashlight on as I called out into the woods to my right. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I yelled, expecting a response, but all I was met with was silence. I called out again, saying how cold it was outside and that I would just like to go home, and this time I got an answer, just not the one I was expecting. From the same direction that the ringtone came from earlier, I heard a man respond to me. "You'll be lucky if you ever make it home again." I took a second to process what I just heard, and though I couldn't tell if it was supposed to be some sort of joke or not, I decided it wasn't worth the risk and immediately turned around. I sprinted back toward my car, looking back over my shoulder every couple of seconds to see if I was being followed. As far as I could see, there was no one chasing after me. But when I got back to my car and began pulling out of the driveway, I noticed the silhouette of someone standing just on the edge of the trail. I reported the incident to DoorDash along with the customer's account name, so hopefully that was handled. I'm still not sure what was going to happen to me that night, but I'm glad I made it home, and since then have made sure not to take any weird orders and do everything I can to avoid dashing at night. It was around 7:30 p.m. when I decided to take my last DoorDash order that night, and I noticed an order that had been sitting on the app for almost 30 minutes without anyone taking it. The order was for someone named Jordan, and he just got a single pizza and a 2-liter drink from one of the smaller pizzerias in town, and right away I saw why nobody was taking it. The tip was only for $2, but like I said, I really didn't mind since I was going to be heading in that direction to get home anyway. I picked up the person's food and started heading toward their address, expecting to recognize the street when I saw it. But the name wasn't familiar to me. And when I pulled up, I realized that was because the customer lived on a private street that looked like it only had one house on it. The gate to the road was left open, so I just drove in. The first thing I saw when I started driving down the private road was a bunch of signs that said "Turn back now" or "Wrong way." And at first, I have to admit that I thought I might be at the wrong address, but it turned out to be right. I finally made it to the house at the end of the long street, and as I pulled up, I began to wonder if anybody even lived there. Even though the porch light was on, the house itself looked like it had been worn down and just hardly kept itself together. I figured that the only way to find out if I was at the right house was to walk up to the door and knock, so that's what I did. I grabbed the pizza and drink and then walked right up the steps. But before I could even knock, that door swung open. The smell that poured out of the house was enough to almost knock me off my feet. But what really made me step backward was when the owner of the house came rushing out of the front door. It was a middle-aged man who looked like he was about 45 or 50 years old, and judging by the dirt that was covering him, I would say he hadn't showered in weeks. "What are you doing here?" he yelled out as he stepped toward me. All I could think to do was to hand over the pizza as I explained that I was the delivery driver. But that was when he asked me something that I never expected. "Who sent you?" I was taken aback by the question and didn't quite know how to answer it. And as I was about to tell him that I was a DoorDasher, he cut me off and started pushing me down the stairs. He continued to yell and ramble as he followed me down the stairs, but I couldn't make out half of the words he was saying. I tried to calm him down, but he had this animal-like look in his eye, and anytime I started speaking, he only got louder and more incoherent. I decided that my best bet was to turn around and get back in my car, but just as I went to walk away, he attacked. From behind, I felt his hand reach over and wrap around my neck as he started trying to force me to the ground. I tried fighting back, but as soon as I started to struggle, he started to squeeze harder and harder. I tried begging him to stop, but the words wouldn't come out, and any noises that did were overpowered by the man's excessive yelling. I could feel my body going limp, and my vision started to fade. And I didn't know if he thought I was knocked out already or not, but thankfully, the man released his grip around my neck and turned around. I waited until I could hear him walking up his stairs before gasping for air and scrambling to get back onto my feet. I ran as fast as I could over to my car and hopped in through the passenger side door because it was closer to me. I climbed over to the driver's seat and got ready to pull out of the driveway when I heard that incoherent screaming again. I looked over to the porch and saw that the man had gone in and grabbed a large knife that he was now holding as he started running down the stairs toward the car. I began backing out of the driveway as fast as possible, with the man chasing me the entire time. He didn't stop until I got back onto the main road, but by that point, I had put enough distance between us that I was comfortable enough to pull out my phone and call the police as I drove down the road. The police went to the man's house and ended up arresting him. As far as they could tell, he was having some sort of paranoid episode that was triggered when I showed up at his door after his son ordered a pizza to be delivered to him without letting him know. I used to love using DoorDash, but not anymore. I don't trust strangers to know my address after the last time I ordered out. It was probably around 7, and I didn't feel like cooking, so I ordered something from Panera. The Dasher got to my house in less than half an hour, but I noticed something off about him almost right away. He knocked on my door pretty aggressively, which wouldn't have bothered me, but after I answered the door, he started hitting on me. He said something like, "I can't believe your man let you come to the door looking like that." And I tried to laugh it off so I could take my food and go, but it really bothered me. I told him that I didn't have a man and that I can answer the door just fine by myself. What he said next made me really uncomfortable though. He laughed for a second and then said, "A girl like you, living by yourself? I'll have to change that." I couldn't stand talking to that man anymore. I took my food from him and told him to have a nice day before closing the door and walking back into the kitchen. I tried to shake off that weird feeling, but something in my stomach told me to check the window and make sure that he actually pulled out of my driveway. And by the time I got there, he was already in the process of backing up. However, I did notice him looking right at the window I was standing in and smiling back at me. I shivered as a chill ran through my body, and then I closed the blinds and started eating my food. That night before going to bed, I made sure that both the front and the back door was locked along with all the windows. I had a hard time falling asleep at first because I couldn't stop thinking about how creepy that man was, but after a while, I started to get tired. I ended up passing out for a little while before I was woken up by a sound that I had always dreaded. Coming from the front door, I could hear the handle shaking as if someone was trying to force it open. I sat up and continued listening to make sure that I wasn't mishearing anything. And as soon as I confirmed that someone was trying to break into my house, I started moving. I got out of my bed and grabbed my phone from the nightstand before closing my bedroom door and locking it. I called the police and just hoped that they answered quickly. Time felt like it was standing still as I started looking around my room for anything that might help me, but I couldn't think of anything. That's when I remembered that the last time I cleaned my room, I moved the dresser a bit and it was just far enough away from the wall for me to fit behind it. The dispatcher answered the phone as I made my way over to the dresser, but before I could start explaining what was happening, I heard the sound of the front door slamming open as if they had just broken through it. I let out a loud gasp and then quickly positioned myself between my dresser and the wall and pulled as many clothes as I could off of my floor and laid it over top myself. I whispered as quietly as I could as I explained that someone had just broken into my house, and the dispatcher assured me that help was on the way. I could hear the person walking around my house, and eventually, a horrifyingly familiar voice called out. "Hello?" the man yelled. A tear started to form in the corner of my eye as I realized that it was the creepy DoorDasher from earlier. I whispered to the dispatcher to please hurry up as I heard the man walking toward my room. I had to stifle a scream as my bedroom door bursted open from the force of the man slamming up against it. I could hear him walking around my room, but I couldn't see anything through the clothes. He looked around for a minute, and when he couldn't find me right away, he quickly moved on to the other rooms in the house. Eventually, he started calling out to me again, saying things like, "I'm going to find you," and "Why don't we just make this easier on the both of us?" I hid under those clothes for what felt like forever while I waited for the police to arrive. But thankfully, they managed to get there before the man found me. I heard him start to panic as the sound of multiple people's footsteps entered the house, and then I heard them ordering him to get on the ground. Once I was sure that he was apprehended, I announced myself to the police and then walked out of my room. I caught the man's gaze as the police walked him out of my house. And to this day, I don't think I'll ever forget that terrifying smile that he flashed my way before being walked outside. I thank the police for saving my life, but it took me a very long time to feel safe in my own house again.